Appreciate everybody for tuning in. I am here with Cha-ching, the money man, Gary Sasse. It is my understanding that he could fix the entire state budget by just grabbing some change off the top of his dresser. I think it's about $230 million. Could wipe out all the state's problem with a little generosity from the money man. Let's jump into it.
If it took all the change off my dresser, we could park for 2 hours in Providence.
He'd still give you a ticket. Thanks so much for being in. A lot of news this week. Let's start Pawtucket. The beautiful stadium is now in, I think, some significant flux. The Speaker of the House came out. A couple major developments. First of all, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee said no financials, the bill's not moving. The governor supported that and then flipped a little bit later in the week, but she was on Gene Valicenti's show on WPRO and said no financials and they can build the stadium themselves. By the end of the week, the Speaker of the House, Nick Mattiello, was saying this deal needs a whole new renegotiations. Clearly this deal is in some peril. First, how are we in such peril? We're in year 3, 2 or 3, can't keep track. We're probably 20 different proposals into this thing, and it's looking like we're headed back to square one.
Well, it's unfortunate because we have a lot of very serious problems. Unbalanced budget, UHIP, falling down schools, and we spend a lot of our time talking about and going through the exercise on the stadium, and the deal never seems to be done. It's too early for post-mortem, but I go back and I look at what's happened, and there are some heroes. I think the mayor of Pawtucket did a superb job representing his community. I think the Pawtucket Foundation, the private sector, government sector in Pawtucket was aggressive and they got some good information on the table. But it's failing at this point, if in fact it is failing, because an utter and total lack of leadership coming from state government, and you can see it at 2 points. The first point is Commerce, Rhode Island, which you and I have discussed before, and not everyone shares my opinion. I think it's fairly inept as an agency. But their job was to work with the city.
Was to do the deal.
Was to do the deal, correct. Work with the city, work with the club. And a lot of questions that are being raised now by the Legislative Committee, by the Senate Finance Committee, and by the House Finance Committee were obvious as the nose on your face. And there were things that if anybody was doing serious deal making, they would have asked and vetted those questions, and there would have been answers available to the finance committees.
Well, one of the questions that's emerging now as a real deal breaker in this would seem to be something that would be done in step 1, which is basic due diligence on the financial stability of the club. Chairman Connolly on the Senate side is saying, where's the financials? We want to see your financials. You're asking us for, first of all, for $38 million plus, and you're asking us to de facto backstop this entire financing. We want to see your books. Wouldn't that be done step 1 at Commerce?
Well, Commerce would get that kind of information. Some of it they might not be able to disclose.
100%.
It might be proprietary, but that kind of information, could be.
How many little plastic helmets of ice cream are being sold? Is that a proprietary factor?
I don't think so. But certain things on the balance sheet, profit and loss. But that's information.
Let me ask you about that. But profit and loss. Let me just ask you, because this is a bigger question. If some private group is coming to the state of Rhode Island and saying, not only give us $38 million, but also guarantee the bonds of this thing for the next 30 years, shouldn't taxpayers know what the profit and loss is?
Well, let me use an example. Terry Murray is one of the investors in this. When he was at Fleet Bank, if I walked in and I said I needed a $38 million loan for my business, I would show him my profit and loss statement.
Yeah.
So it's good for a goose. It's certainly good for the gander. But the point too is that Commerce, Rhode Island, did another lousy job in negotiating a deal. And I think I don't want to go off track, but let's look at some of the other deals that negotiated. We'll find out how well those were negotiated very soon.
Isn't one of the problems just the amount of due diligence they do? We linked it today in a piece about Lance Robbins, the biggest slumlord in L.A.
I don't know if it's lack of due diligence. It's a philosophy. If I know the guy, there are orders coming from the State House. I don't have any idea because I think there are competent people that work there, but it's not a competent organization. They didn't do their work. But also, as far as the legislature is concerned, The Senate President seemed to be an advocate at one time, maybe still is, for this proposal. The Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee clearly is an advocate for this proposal.
he represents
Why did they have a checklist information? And before the first hearing started, went through that checklist and said, hey guys, we can't start the hearing because 3 of the boxes are not checked.
Well, if you go get a mortgage, they send you a long, long list of all the documents you need to get in before they'll spend 1 second on it. You know, tax returns, this thing, that thing. Well, it is perplexing that an issue like basic core financials of the organization, and listen, if those guys want to go finance it themselves, and we were in a minority position and they were getting some funding, but we weren't backstopping it with our state's moral responsibility to the bonds, that might be a different scenario, or not. But this seems to be a very, very strange situation we're in at a very late hour, and also putting tremendous pressure on elected officials going into an election.
Well, it puts tremendous pressure on elected officials, but it also erodes, unless it's resolved quickly, the confidence people have in their government, because the kinds of information, the kinds of questions that are being asked are pretty routine in doing a deal of this type or any other type. And the question then becomes to me, okay, who was representing me as a taxpayer?
Right.
Who was representing John Q. Public? Well, it was Commerce, Rhode Island. Well, Commerce, Rhode Island obviously didn't do that, or if they did do that, they hid information from the legislature. Don't think they did, and so that's the first problem. And it's unfortunate because this could be a good deal. It may not be a bad deal. As you know, I'm still trying to sort my way through it, but I certainly feel let down by ineffective state agency not doing their work. The second thing, which we haven't discussed, because the buck has to stop somewhere. And the buck doesn't totally stop at Commerce RI, it stops on the second floor of the State House. It stops in the governor's office. And any project, I don't care what state it's in, of this magnitude in terms of public visibilities, because the price are a lot more expensive projects than a lot bigger things do. But we knew it would be a controversial project. We knew we were coming off a hangover from 38 studios, and if this was a good project for Pawtucket, a good project for the state, you would expect the leader, the governor, to use her bully pulpit, to use political capital, and to come out and say, no, this is a good project, it's an important project for the state, it's an important project to rebuild one of our urban communities, and I strongly support it. Demanded that her staff and her Commerce Department do its job, get it done right, and yet you got an attitude that kind of leadership was missing in this discussion. Oh yeah, it's a good project, I'm for it, and then yes, they don't show the statements, we can't do it. There's been a total lack of effective use of a bully pulpit, of leadership. I would follow a strong leader, even if I had reservations and questions, and then hold the person responsible for the ballot box.
So you can't, listen, the statement by Speaker Mattiello that we had in today's article is pretty strong, and he's not exactly the kind of guy who doubles back, whether you agree with him or don't agree with him. He's not a guy that doubles back on many of his statements. Is this a start over? I mean, he has functionally said this is a start over. Speaker of the House is the most powerful person relative to purse strings. You can't pass it without him, that's for sure.
I don't know what a start over means, because a start over can mean there are 10 items and we have to fix 3 of them, because 7 of them are in pretty good shape. So I don't know if 7 are in good shape and we have to fix 3. I think in the Speaker's mind there's a political consideration, because the polling data shows in his district's a pretty typical district in the state, that there's some reservations of using public money, and they have not made a good case for the use of public money.
Is the way to solve this that the owners build the stadium, the state does the roads and the land?
Well, that horse left the barn a long time ago.
But is that the only way to save it?
No, there's another way to save it. And there was a story in the Providence Journal, I think, recently, that quoted an economist from the University of Michigan.
But that was their economist.
It was an economist.
Their paid economist.
But he said one thing that was really very interesting, and I think there's a lot of merit to it. Because in the past he had been very much opposed to public support for these kinds of projects. But he said if it was in terms of helping a community, helping to rebuild a community, The ancillary development is important. The stadium itself didn't rebuild a community,
Right.
but if there was ancillary development, and I'll give the ownership and the group credit for this. They came forward with a very aggressive plan with a lot of ancillary development around the stadium. Well, I think it's a pretty simple solution. If that's the economic engine that can drive this project, then the people who were proposing this development, don't give me a $5,000 schematic, give the public a contract. That this ancillary development is going to happen. It will support redevelopment for that.
But is that realistic? Listen, they won't turn over their financials. They won't guarantee the project. They could flip this thing the day after this project goes forward to a new ownership group picked by the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox obviously have important factors to it. The owners that are involved, as we understand, are wildly frustrated by this and would love to run, not walk away from their investment in this thing. So, without that guarantee, which they're not even willing to turn over their financials in private, is that realistic?
I don't know what's realistic. I know if I was a business person,
yeah,
trying to do business with this administration,
yeah.
this state government, and I first of all dealt with somebody who apparently didn't get the information they should have gotten from me. I had to scratch my head.
Yeah.
Second of all, I'm dealing with a leader of that organization that's not 100% gung-ho on my side, and helping me get this thing done right and help me grease the skids to work it through. Then I would not think this would be a great business climate, a place that I would want to operate and work, with the government. I think there are issues much deeper than Pawtucket Stadium that go through how this project is being negotiated and where it is.
Let's jump over, we've just spent 10 minutes talking about a project that might employ 30 people, might have impact in one community. Late last week, one of the biggest blockbuster deals in the history of business, literally, was announced. It has mammoth implications to the state of Rhode Island. CVS, it was leaked to the Wall Street Journal, is made a $66 billion offer. $66 billion. We're talking about a lousy $80 million stadium. And to buy Aetna. Aetna, located in Hartford, Connecticut, has announced that they're moving their headquarters to New York City previous to the announcement of the acquisition. This would make it, in total revenue, the second largest company in the United States, second only to Walmart. The implications for Rhode Island are mammoth. Could be the biggest winner, could be the biggest loser. What's your takeaway from the initial announcement?
Well, you have to be impressed, with both Aetna and with CVS, particularly CVS, because they thought about this strategically. And they, looked out at the environment and they said, boy, we better change or we could get eaten up. And so I just want to talk for a minute, about what CVS did, because this is a great contrast. If you were teaching leadership at Bryant, this would be leadership, and what we just discussed on the Paw Sox would be an example of not leadership. But they looked at their competition, they looked at it strategically, they looked at options, they came with this option. First thing, great defensive move, because the retail pharmacy business is just ripe for e-commerce.
Yeah.
And so they have created a situation where they can compete and probably compete successfully, with Amazon and e-commerce. And that's a big part of their business. A second major part, they are a huge pharmacy benefit management corporation.
Right.
And the way the industry is being restructured, the alliance with Aetna, with pharmacy management, with negotiating power to purchase from pharmaceuticals, with development of walk-in clinics or other type of clinics, represent a lot of how the health industry is going to look. And for better or worse, Obamacare is forcing consolidation.
Absolutely.
And so they have strategically looked at it. They put themselves in a defensive posture against e-commerce, and then they look forward about pharmacy management, about clinics, about the delivery of health services, how it's going to look, going forward. You've got the largest drugstore chain in the country, the third largest health insurer by revenue, talking about to get together. It's a brilliant move, I don't think they're out of the woods, because I think our friends at the Justice Department and other federal regulators are looking at this very closely. But it's an important move, and it's important for Rhode Island because it shows that a large employer in the state
The largest private employer.
is cutting edge.
Yeah.
And that's where we were when we were leading the Industrial Revolution 125 years ago. We had cutting edge companies here. And so I think that is
Could CVS win and Rhode Island lose? Could they pack up and follow the Aetna
Well-
move and consolidate a new headquarters in New York?
well, you have to ask CVS that.
Yeah.
I think CVS, I've known the Goldsteins. I knew the company when it first
Yeah.
got started as a CVS, the Consumer Value Store. When
Yeah, that's right.
Socket,
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah.
I think they're very committed to Rhode Island. I think, however, there is a couple of issues in terms of having the skilled labor force
Yeah.
and having the education. You can see the corporate headquarters here, but you can see them farming out certain different parts of the business.
They're so big. I mean, this is almost an HQ too, the Amazon second headquarters. It's so big that you could transform Rhode Island if you move those Aetna people over here. Now,
I don't see that happening though.
you think they'll have 3 campuses, a New York, a Hartford, and a here? I bet they go to 2.
Well, I don't think it'll be a Hartford campus. I think Aetna will have its own campus, but no one knows. It's
Yeah.
not sitting.
What's the review process? A year?
By the end of this year, they should get it done.
Through federal regulatory?
Not through federal,
No.
through the internal negotiations, and then probably a year and a half. But the fact is that a Rhode Island company is on a cutting edge. Is taking the
Oh, I
lead.
think it has the potential to be one of the biggest improvements to Rhode Island, and hopefully we make sure we do everything we can to make this the place that they consolidate as many jobs in the best deal we possibly can. We don't need to give away everything, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think they need us to give away.
No, and well, CVS, we've been very generous to CVS in the tax credits.
Absolutely.
It's been a period of time. But this is the classic case of private sector, leading.
Right.
Government can't pick winners and losers. We have our state government is sitting in a corner somewhere, picking out tax deals to give to build hotels and office buildings, and they're catching elephants and butterflies, and all the elephants are marching into the private sector.
It is pretty stark contrast.
And the lesson is this, that if you create a business climate that's hospitable and you support your homegrown businesses, this is a big deal.
Listen, we in many ways couldn't be a better host to CVS. We've helped them grow. We've built entire highways for them. We've changed tax structure for them to be able to thrive, and it's paid off with, I think they're up to 7,000 or 8,000 private sector jobs, and potentially, could be another 10,000 if depending on how things consolidate. Last but not least, let's race down to Washington D.C. and talk. Your Republican friends are considering major tax overhaul with tax cuts. I know rich guys, I read the paper, rich guys like you are going to make out big. You 1%ers, half of 1%. How's the rest of us going to do? How are us middle class folks, lower middle class, working stiffs here at Go Local, how are we going to make out?
Well, let's see the details. Wednesday's going to be a big day because the House is going to release the specifics. The outline is pretty good. Keep in mind there are 2 or 3 objectives.
Yep.
First objective is to make our corporate tax structure more competitive.
Yep.
It's not. Our corporate rate is 35%. I think the average nationally for industrialized countries is about 22%. We have our corporations running overseas. We can't get money back here. And even though the corporations get most of the benefit from the corporate tax changes, capital formation is different, affects workers as well. And economists are arguing whether 65% goes to the big guys and 35% to labor, or whether it's 40-60 or what. But corporate tax, that's the first objective. That has to be done. The second is a middle-class tax cut by making the code simpler and closing loopholes, lowering rates, things that we always talk about.
Is that going to happen? I mean, there's lots of.
Well, it's going to be.
There's some questions, and then 401ks, and what's going to happen? Is the middle class going to be better off under this? Because honestly, I think this is the legacy of the Republican Party and Donald Trump's financial fiscal policies and midterm elections and all the rest of it.
Well, let's see. I don't know the answer to that question. I know that there are certain things that you can look at that'll begin to tell you. The initial proposal lowered the top marginal rate from 39.5 to 35%. Top marginal rate, there should be a marginal rate of 39.9%. It also increased the standard deduction from 12 to 25,000, so it's a 25,000 zero tax bracket. So now it becomes a question of arithmetic. Is the middle class person better off from lower rates, a broader base, and not getting the benefit of certain itemizations?
Are we going to keep mortgage deduction?
That's a very good, the interest on the mortgage deduction, that's a very hot topic right now. I think we'll keep it, but it'll be capped. I think the same thing for state and local tax deduction. I think you will see the deal that will be made will keep the deduction for property taxes, but repeal the deduction for income and sales taxes. So there's all that stuff to wash through, and then
I cannot wait for next Monday.
Well,
next Monday might be dedicated to this.
Next Monday will be dedicated to this because I may not be here.
You have to. You'll have to Skype in. We'll make you Skype in.
But there are three things that can happen, and so you got to cut it away to the basics. There could be a successful negotiation.
Yeah.
There can be.
That would be the first time in Washington D.C. in the last.
Since '86.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
There could be a reasonable compromise fallback position, and I can see that coming through.
There's two.
Or failure.
Yeah.
Those are the three.
If recent history is a betting place, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Hopefully we'll see you next Monday.
Try.
And thanks everybody. We're going to be right back. We've got a special guest in, talk a little bit about the business economy here in Rhode Island, and we'll be right back.